Unitarian Universalist lecture series, which we sponsor in an effort to promote awareness of social justice and environmental issues in our community. I am Russ Littlefield, and I am currently serving as president of the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Lake County. Unitarian Universalism has a long history of working for social justice everywhere in the world. And it is our hope that these talks will give you a deeper understanding of some of the issues that affect Lake County and Central Florida. An important symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, including our commitment to social justice and environment, is the lighting of a chalice. Before services and important meetings and events, we ignite a flame to light our way. Before we get to tonight's presentation, please give our tech team leader, Val Rosado, your attention, as she will tell you how you may use some of the features of Zoom to participate in tonight's program. Val?
Hello, everybody. Let me get out. I'm behind the scenes here trying to do more than one thing at a time. Welcome. We're so glad you could be with us. You are all muted currently, and we would ask you to stay muted until there's a discussion or something where you're asked to participate, and then you can unmute. If some questions arise in your mind while you're hearing the presentation that you would like to ask later at the end of the program, please put them in the chat box, and one of our tech team members will read those later, and we'll also have a time when you can raise your hand to ask a question or give a comment. I want to let everyone know that this is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube, so you or friends and coworkers can watch it later. We're going to be using breakout rooms tonight. This is the first time our tech team has tried this, so please bear with us. There'll be two instances where we'll go to separate rooms, so you'll see less people on your screen. Oh, you have two modes you can watch this in, speaker mode and gallery mode. In speaker mode, the speaker is prominent on the screen. In gallery mode, you see other people who are here, and there are probably more than one screen full here, and there are little arrows to the sides where you can switch to other screens to see who's here. And when we go to the breakout rooms, you'll be randomly assigned to a room, and one of the four facilitators will be in the room and give you some further instructions there. The first time we break out, you'll only be in the room for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll come back, and the facilitators will give you an idea of what we're going to do tonight, and then later on we'll break into 4 rooms. So let's see, from here, let's go to Cassandra. Okay, Cassandra.
Okay, let me start the screen sharing. Screen share. Okay, so hello everyone. We are really excited to be here with you this evening so that we can do the racial wealth gap learning simulation together. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We also sincerely thank the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lake County for sharing their platform and for remaining steady in the struggle for social justice. The simulation was co-created by Bread for the World Institute and Network, and is an interactive tool that helps folks understand racial inequality and the structural level and how it connects with social justice issues like ending hunger and poverty. So let's get started. First, I'd like to assure you that with your full attention and active participation, this will be an eye-opening experience. Remember, the amount of participation that you put in determines what you will gain from this event. Our goal this evening is to paint a clear and convincing picture of the African American experience, our reality, and how the policies have and continue to systematically discriminate against people of color. Remember, this is a learning experience, and we are all here to learn. Please also keep in mind that the assimilation was designed to be an in-person activity. However, by show of hands, how many of you are with me in refusing to allow COVID to stand in the way of our progress? Great.
No.
So we all agree that we will not let COVID stand in our way, so we will make this work virtually. There are 3 other facilitators joining tonight, and that is Mae Hazleton, David Crump, and Mary Ellen Griffith. They will have a few words for you in just a little bit. So if you take just a few seconds to read this is the author of the presentation, and her name is Marlissa D. Gamblin. So that's just a quick little excerpt about her and some of the work that she's done in the past. I hope I'm not moving too quickly, but I'm gonna go on to the next slide. So before we start the simulation, here is a roadmap of how we will be spending our time together. First, you will hear a few words from our facilitators, and then we will go into 2 breakout rooms where you will be assigned a number. You will either receive a number 1 or a number 2. It is very important that you either jot down this number or remember the number. This process, as Val said, will only take about 2 minutes, and then we will all come back to the main room. So once we are back in that room, we will start the exercise. Following the exercise, we will break out into 4 small groups for a smaller group discussion. And that will take, we'll give you about 20 minutes to discuss what you've learned, some of your experiences. And while we're in the smaller groups, we will need we will need 1 person for each group to take notes and be prepared to come back to the bigger group and share some of the highlights from your smaller group discussions. So please make sure that as soon as you get into the breakout groups, our facilitators will ask for a volunteer. Hopefully someone will be able to take those notes and share once we come back. With that being said, we thank you for participating, and we are confident that you will enjoy and appreciate the experience. So now, what's the scope? Today, more than 41 million Americans face hunger. Over 40.6 million people live below the poverty line. Half of American households would face poverty if someone lost a job or got sick. And so we can all kind of think about how COVID hit and how, people lost their jobs. And so we have a lot of people going through this right now. And a fact that many might not know is that 1 in 2 American households would face hunger or poverty if they lost their job or got sick. This is what we call liquid asset poverty. This essentially means that 50% of Americans could become poor, which really expands the scope of food insecurity or hunger. It means that hunger is something that not only low-income households are at risk of facing, but it goes beyond that. What's the scope? People of color are more likely to face all three. They are twice as likely to experience hunger, live below the poverty line, be one paycheck away from becoming poor. When we drill down into the numbers, we see that communities of color, as I mentioned, are at least 2 times as likely to face all three. They are more likely to experience the hunger, poverty, or the vulnerability of falling into poverty. And we didn't even throw in the account for intersectionality around gender, immigration status, the status of returning citizens, people who just got out of prison or jail. These rates climb as high as 7 times when you fall into one of those categories. But why? Why is it that communities of color are at least twice as likely to experience hunger and poverty as the general population? This is why, and this is what we're going to learn about tonight: the racial wealth and income divide. Now Val will break us out into our 2 groups so that you will be assigned a number. And please remember your number. Don't come back with a 4 because we're not passing out 4s. You will either receive a 1 or a 2. Thank you. So now that we are back, we will go ahead and start with the assimilation, and I will start to screen share.
Do you want to introduce David? And
my apologies. Yes, I was going to let the facilitators say a few words. Please go ahead. Mae, would you like to start?
Yes, I'll start. I'm really excited. I told the group in the first breakout room, how excited I've been that you and I have been working on this. And this is a challenge for all of us to take a look at what goes on in the country and decide, gather the information, know what's going on, and then decide what we're going to do. But the exercise itself is going to be very illuminating, and I'm excited to be a part of this.
So my name is David Crump, and I'm excited to be here as well. I appreciate being asked to be one of the moderators in this process that we're going to be doing. It sounds exciting to me. I'm looking forward to seeing what I learn as well. And I'm connected with the U Church, and I also, my employment is with the Farm Workers Association of Florida, which is located in Apopka. So good to be here with all of you. Thanks.
Cassandra, you're on mute.
Not now, right? I'm good now?
Yes, thank you.
My name is Mary Ellen Griffith. I teach in Lake County and occasionally adjunct at Valencia College. I became really interested in Black history in 2008 when I had a professor from Daytona Beach College come speak to my students during Black History Month. And I told him my parents had retired to Lake County and I was going to be moving there. And he said, "You're moving where?" And gave me the whole spiel about Lake County. And ever since then, I have been fascinated there's so many things that we don't know. And you know what? I'm still learning. When I got these policies today, I've learned so much, and I'm so glad to be here. And it's going to be a lot of fun, too. So thanks. I'm honored that you asked me to do this.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. Now I will try my best to screen share. Get it? Okay. How do I make this bigger? Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to make this bigger.
You can make
So
the,
these are, you should have received a printout. And so here you have money cards. You have the land cards, and you also have lost opportunity cards. And let me see, close that one.
We aren't
Next.
seeing your screen, Cassandra.
You don't see it?
no, you
No.
haven't shared the screen yet.
Okay, let me figure that part out. I thought I was sharing already.
Once you,
Okay.
after you click share screen, pick the file that, there you go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, now, can one of you, the tech team, pull up the policies for me? You may have to screen share it because my screen is doing something weird right now.
Henry, can you do that?
Oh, wait, is this it? Okay, this looks like it. Thank you, Henry, I have it. Okay, so those of you that were assigned a number 1, today you will participate as a Black participant. So everybody that was in my group, you are a Black participant. If you were in Mae's group, you should have been assigned a number 2. You are a white participant today. Fairly simple, right? Everybody should be okay with that. Nothing too complicated. As I read the policies, each facilitator will read different policies, but I'll read the policy like how it is here, and then at the bottom, you'll see that there are actions that different participants will take. So let's go ahead and start with policy number 1, Andrew Johnson's land policies and sharecropping. After the Civil War, only 30,000 African Americans owned small plots of land compared to 4 million who did not, because in 1865, federal law rescinded the government's promise of 40 acres of land for former slaves. These 4 million Blacks largely resorted to renting the farmland of their previous master in exchange for a share of their crop. This system of sharecropping tied farmers to their former master because they were legally obligated to buy all farming materials, usually at higher prices, and sell their farming crops solely to their former master, usually at lower prices. So now I need the Black participants, which were in my group, you were assigned a number 1, to pick up 1 land card and 1 money card to represent the less than 1% of African Americans who were able to own land and not face debt after slavery. Unfortunately, Black participants should also pick up 4 lost opportunity cards for the 4 million African Americans who had to sharecrop and were denied the initial promise of land ownership. Buying farm supplies from the landowner at higher prices only to sell their crops back at lower prices resulted in African Americans facing higher levels of debt and higher rates of hunger. So next we will move on to policy 2 with policy 2 and 3 with Mae Hazleton.
Policy 2, land seizures. From 1865 on, Blacks could have their land seized and pay sharecropping debts, or simply because the white landowners declared that Black farmers or businesses were in debt. Blacks could not fight these charges because they were legally prohibited from suing whites in court. In addition, from 1949 to 1970, 1 million people lost their land to abuses of the power of eminent domain. which allows local governments to seize private property. About 70% of these families were African Americans. Here are our actions. For white participants, pick up 1 land card and 2 money cards for having the legal ability to seize the land of Black farmers and business owners, increasing your income and reducing your vulnerability to hunger. Black participants, return a land card for the land lost under the land seizures. Also, return a money card for the tens of millions of dollars lost from no longer having land to help earn an income and grow food to eat. Policy number 3 involves the National Housing Act of 1934, but part 1 of it. Policies under this law guaranteed federally backed loans to whites and legally refused loans to Blacks and anyone else who chose to live in or near Black neighborhoods. This practice, known as redlining, targeted entire Black neighborhoods and identified them as grade D. This made it nearly impossible for appraisers in the private sector to do business in Black neighborhoods because all the residents were considered bad credit risk. We still hear about redlining today. White participants, pick up 1 land card and 1 money card for the equity gained in purchasing homes not near Black neighborhoods. Equity increased a family's ability to save for future needs, Black participants, do not pick up any land cards because of the inability to purchase homes. Do not pick up any money cards since it was illegal to lend to Blacks, preventing them from building equity and weakening their ability to save for future needs.
Policy number 4, the National Housing Act of 1934, Part 2. Since this legislation prevented Blacks from receiving federally backed home mortgages, whites usually purchased homes in Black neighborhoods and then sold housing contracts to Blacks who wanted to become homeowners, often for 2 or 3 times the amount of the mortgage. These contracts only guaranteed Black families the rights to the house after all the payments were complete. Missing even 1 payment or being late would result in the Black family losing their house immediately. So white participants, in this case, you pick up 2 land cards for being able to legally purchase homes at the market rate, and pick up 2 money cards for the equity earned from home ownership. Black participants, pick up 1 land card for signing a contract for a home in hopes of becoming a homeowner one day. Do not pick up any money cards because contracts stripped additional income and wealth from several generations. Also pick up 1 lost opportunity card because of the higher interest rate and the less equity earned once the home was actually purchased. Policy number 5, the Social Security Act. This act excluded farm workers and domestic workers who were predominantly Black from receiving old age and unemployment insurance. Although Social Security was meant to help those affected by the Great Depression, and African Americans were twice as likely as the quote-unquote average American family to face hunger during this time, 65% of African Americans were ineligible to receive Social Security. White participants pick up one money card for being able to benefit from unemployment and old age insurance during a very grim time in American history. Black participants pick up one lost opportunity card for the inability to benefit from unemployment insurance, even though African Americans were between 2 and 3 times as likely as whites to experience poverty and hunger.
Policy number 6, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. This was enacted to help bolster the economy and get the country out of the Great Depression, but it excluded tip-based jobs and other jobs predominantly held by Black workers. That includes waitresses, waiters, other servers, shoe shiners, domestic workers like maids and child care workers, farmers, and Pullman porters from the first ever minimum wage legislation. Even though the Black unemployment, hunger, and poverty rates were at least twice those of whites during the Great Depression, the very policies meant to alleviate economic strain were withheld from the Black community. White participants pick up one money card for benefiting from the minimum wage to make their families less vulnerable to hunger and poverty. And Black participants pick up one lost opportunity card for being stuck in tip-based occupations that did not offer a minimum wage to help families survive during the Great Depression. This made it even harder for them to get back on their feet and build for the future. Policy number 7, the GI Bill of 1944. This was enacted to help World War II veterans adjust to civilian life by providing low-cost home mortgages, low-interest business loans, tuition assistance, and unemployment insurance. Unfortunately, Black veterans were excluded from many of these benefits. White participants pick up 2 money cards and 1 land card for the opportunities you received, such as government guaranteed housing loans, which help build the American middle class. Black participants. Only 1 Black participant picks up a money card representing the few African Americans who had access to some benefits of the GI Bill. All Black participants pick up 1 lost opportunity card for not being able to benefit from the GI Bill, even though they too had fought for the United States in World War II.
Policy number 8, overturn of separate but equal doctrine. Although the separate but equal doctrine was declared unconstitutional in 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, American schools are more racially segregated today than at any other time in the past 4 decades. Academic success is less likely in predominantly low-income Black neighborhoods. Black students are 5 times as likely to live in an area of concentrated poverty with underfunded, understaffed, and overcrowded schools. This leaves Black students with limited education, and many often settle for minimum wage jobs that offer little hope of advancement or better pay. White participants pick up 2 money cards for having up to $733 higher annual per student spending on education than Black students. This contributes to a greater likelihood of attending college and later getting a higher paying job. Black participants pick up only 1 money card to represent the 75% high school graduation rate among African American students, compared to 88% among white students. Also, pick up one lost opportunity card for the lower student spending that helps funnel many Black students into low-wage work after high school. Policy number 9, subprime loans. Starting in the 1970s and continuing today, the private sector issued subprime loans, which are loans with higher interest rates, to Black families almost exclusively, regardless of a family's income, education, or good credit history. As a result, Blacks continue to unfairly pay more for homes of the same value as their white counterparts. This increases foreclosure rates among Blacks, which also contributes to higher food insecurity levels or hunger. White participants pick up 2 land cards and 2 money cards for securing good interest rates on homes. Black participants. Blacks were forced into subprime mortgages as their only option for more than 3 generations, stripping income and wealth from the Black community. High-income Blacks were 80% more likely to lose their homes than high-income whites when the housing bubble burst in 2008, and 240,000 Blacks lost their homes. Therefore, Black participants pick up only 1 land card and 1 money card.
Policy number 10, the war on drugs. The war on drugs, initiated in 1971 and continuing today, widened the racial wealth gap with policies targeting Black and brown communities. Although rates of using and selling drugs are comparable across racial lines, Blacks are up to 10 times as likely to be stopped, searched, arrested, prosecuted, convicted, and are incarcerated for drug violations as whites. Since this means that Black families are up to 10 times as likely to have a family member sent to prison, they are more than 10 times as likely to fall into hunger because of incarceration. White participants. Return 2 money cards for the more than $180 billion in tax dollars that it costs to maintain mass incarceration today. Also, pick up 1 lost opportunity card, since these taxpayer dollars could instead be used to support programs that end hunger and poverty in the United States. Black participants. Combined debt and property depreciation increase hunger and poverty rates within the Black community. Return 2 money cards for being more likely to be incarcerated than whites, and owing debt of about $13,000 per household in fees and court costs when a family member is incarcerated. Return 1 land card for the estimated $11 billion in lower property values in many African American communities caused by the return of large numbers of people from jail or prison.
Policy number 11, life after incarceration, consequences of the war on drugs. When people are released from jail or prison, they are hoping for a second chance, but they face more than 48,000 separate restrictions known as collateral consequences. Some examples of lifelong penalties include being denied the right to vote in some states, being prohibited from applying to higher paying jobs, being ineligible to participate in social safety net programs such as SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, previously known as food stamps, and other restrictions such as being banned from getting a barber's license. Since blacks are up to 10 times as likely as whites to be stopped, arrested, and sentenced, they are also up to 10 times as likely to face these restrictions. So for the black participants, there are 5 times as many blacks as whites returning home from criminal records. Pick up 2 lost opportunity cards to represent how black communities are more likely to fall into hunger because so many returnees are unable to reintegrate into society, get a job, and or access to SNAP benefits.
Policy number 12, employment discrimination. Although racial discrimination in the workforce was legally abolished in 1964 with the Civil Rights Act, racial discrimination continues among all education, cut that out, so I'm so sorry, among all educational levels and job sectors. For example, blacks are twice as likely not to be called back after they complete job applications or interviews. In addition, the gap between the hourly pay of blacks and whites has grown from $3.55 an hour in 1979 to $6.73 an hour in 2016. White participants, pick up 2 money cards for being twice as likely to receive a callback for a job and earning an average of $14,000 a year more than your black peers. Black participants, pick up 2 lost opportunity cards for being 2 times less likely to receive a job callback and for earning an average of $14,000 a year less than your white peers. Doing the math shows that racial discrimination in the workforce costs black workers at least $600,000 over the course of their working years.
Policy 13, voting restrictions. Voting is key to ending hunger. As early as 1890, blacks faced organized campaigns to prevent them from voting, including biased literacy tests, poll taxes, and lynching. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act passed, making efforts to prevent voting illegal. But today, people returning from jail or prison who are disproportionately black are denied the right to vote in many states. In addition, as recently as 2017, states have proposed voter ID laws, which would require voters to have government-issued identification. It is more difficult for African Americans to obtain these. 1 in 4 face barriers, compared with 1 in 10 whites. Barriers include, for example, having to pay up to $150 for an acceptable copy of a birth certificate and Social Security card, travel costs, and time taken off from work. Black participants, pick up 1 lost opportunity card for 1, being prevented from voting in the early 1900s when the votes of black people might have prevented some of the harmful laws mentioned in this simulation from being enacted. And 2, still facing voting restrictions that disproportionately impact black communities and weaken efforts to improve policies that end hunger and poverty. So now that is the end of our simulation. Let me go back to this slide. So this is what, and at the beginning I should have told you to you could use a chart if you didn't print off the printouts for the money cards and the land cards. But this is basically what you all should have ended up with, whether you were a Black participant or a white participant today. This slide clearly shows the racial wealth gap. So we see that Blacks have, I think it's 9 lost opportunity cards. We only ended up with 1 money card, 1 land card, and then whites have this many. So as we can see, the simulation does a pretty good job of breaking that down. So like I said, on the left, on the right, you do see the chart. Next, what we will do is break out into 4 smaller groups. Each of the facilitators will be in a group. You have about 20 minutes for discussion. Remember, each group will need the 1 volunteer to take the notes and be prepared to briefly share highlights from your group's discussion once we return. We only ask that you are respectful of everyone's opinions and feelings, even if we may not all agree. We also ask that you keep an open mind. We are all here to learn. And we hope that you will be willing to speak, but more importantly, willing to listen to the others in your group. Val, I think we're ready to.
Looks like we're all here at this point, and welcome. Just curious, as a starting point, if I could see a show of hands. Let me go to gallery view here so I can see everyone. Just a show of hands of how many of us are number ones. Okay, and number twos? All right, great. So I'm glad to see that we're kind of a mixed group here, sort of a mixed race group together. So first of all, I just wanted to ask if we could have a volunteer to kind of take some notes or at least be prepared to report to the larger group when we go back. We're going to have about 20 minutes here. Then we're going to go back to the larger group and have report outs from the 4 small groups, and then opportunity for discussion there as well. So I have a volunteer.
I'll do it, David. This is Nancy Hurlbert.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nancy. All right, so I guess first of all, just curious to hear from you what you felt, what you thought as we're going through the exercise, hearing the different policies and how they impacted you as either white participants or Black participants. Yeah, Jane?
I was really shocked. I mean, I knew about, no Social Security for domestic and farm laborers, and I'd heard about redlining, but I had no idea of all those other policies, the ones in the 40s and 50s and 60s that just really, really hurt generational wealth. That's just, and why African Americans were entitled to GI Bill benefits, that was a real shocker too.
Someone else?
My father served 30 years in the Army, and to know, I'm Cassandra's mom, to know that he gave that much time of his life to a country that purposely, systematically instilled laws and rules and policies to keep him from getting ahead. And it trickles down. It hasn't got any better as things get worse here in this country. It just continues to get worse because of the things that were put into place in the 60s and the 70s. It's like we will never, as a people, recover from all those things.
So you're sharing how your family has lived what we learned in this brief process that we went through this evening. Well,
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes, Constance, you're on mute right now.
I've been interested in following reparations for African Americans, and I think it's something that's long overdue because of the aforementioned atrocities that were committed against them by the federal government, denying them housing and, lots of just unbelievable things. So I'm hoping that maybe someday we'll be able to see a reparations bill come down where some of these families, all of these families, will have get some funds to account for their the horrible way they were treated during the 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Anyway.
Thank you, Constance. Yeah. Yes, Carolyn, you're also on mute. There we go.
I just wanted to say that as far as land acquisition and that kind of thing in the Black community, my father was a builder in Leesburg for years, and he acquired property. But what happened over on the east side of town, I have like 2 houses there, 2 small houses. But those houses are on 2 separate pieces of property. But when you go to the tax office, when I acquired the land, when you go to the tax office, the 2 houses are on, as far as the land description, on the on the one property. And so I would have to pay money to divide those properties on that land. And a lot of that was happening in the Black community, probably like the 1930s, and on up. But now it's better now, but still that problem exists in those properties that were situated that way. And to me, that's an unjust thing.
So there's consequences from what happened years ago, decades ago, but
Right.
Still consequences that live out today. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Someone else? Yes, Isaura.
I was a group 1, and I was sad but not shocked, because this is the story of my life, the story of my family, my grandparents. And so I'm not from the United States, but in my country, Brazil, the situation is the same. So we always fighting, trying to get things, and the life never changes. And unfortunately, it's 2000, 2001, and the situation is still the same. My heart is hurting to see this, that we don't have any opportunities. And I hope one day this will change.
Thank you. Yeah, Carol?
Made me very, very angry. Just very angry at the injustice. And I want to see some things done. I want to see benefits for former military given to them. The farm workers and domestic workers given Social Security. I mean, it's only with COVID that some of them are able to get supplemental income or unemployment insurance. It just makes me incredibly, incredibly angry. I think that the banks and the mortgage companies should be picketed and shamed, just totally shamed for what they're doing. That's all. I'm just almost speechless with anger.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, I understand. Jane?
Catherine, you might want to call on her because she hasn't spoken. Tatum.
Sorry, Catherine? I think it's Catherine, then we'll go to Jane, and then we'll go to Russ.
Okay, I'm looking around here, and I think I'm the oldest person in the crowd. And this is the story of my life. Terrible, terrible story that I've had to live with, and I didn't have anything to do with trying to, with the way it worked out. But I tried to get on the right side. When I was asked to vote, I sold real estate and had really good success with homes around $100,000. And the inequities have been very glaring. I'm a woman, and so I know about that. And then multiply that, and that's my Black friends. And believe me, it's the part of my life that I really wish I could leave a better footprint when I go. Thank you so much for coming to our meeting.
Okay, that statistic about our schools being more segregated now than they've been in the last 40 years. I was wondering if Carol and Samuel, because of your involvement in the school system, if you could comment on that, number one. Number two, is it caused or being made worse by all these charter schools and private schools, which the taxpayers are paying for?
Jane, I don't really know the statistics now as far as, the numbers and the racial percentages in the schools, because I've been out for 5 years. I retired 5 years ago, and quite frankly, I haven't really kept up with the numbers. But I do know that when I was in the school system, that charter schools had privileges that really took away from public schools, because if they had X amount of students in their schools enrolled, then that was like a displacement from public schools, and public schools funds had to pay for those students who attended the the charter schools and the private schools, and they got all of the amenities like the exceptional education programs. Public schools had to pay someone to take care of those and other programs. So it's really that system, and I don't think it's gotten any better. And so that's where, to me, the inequities come, because if you got a school mainly in a Black community, the students who are going to attend that school will be mostly the kids who come from that area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'm going to go to Russ, and then I'll come back to Carol.
And Constance has had her hand up.
All right. So I just wanted to comment on in this way. During the last election, I actually found myself feeling a little optimistic about, largely because of the voting situation and the fact that so many people made such extraordinary efforts to vote. And even though difficulties were put in their way. And now I see that there's a resurgence of an effort to increase the difficulty for people voting. And even within the state level, within the local level rather, we have some good people who are conscientious and I think want fair elections. This was a fair election, despite the fact that we have all this propaganda telling us it was not a fair election. And I think that's the thing we have to watch out for, especially, and that is we have to watch out for truth molders, people who just simply refuse to tell the truth, but just keep telling the same lies over and over and over again until people believe them, about the election, for example. It's very clear that this election was fairly conducted, and when challenged, challenges amounted to nothing. And yet we still have all of this going on. I think that we have a job cut out for us, those of us who are interested in politics, in assuring that the next election is just as fair as this one. That's all for now.
Thank you, Russ. We're going to go to Constance and then Carol. And then after that, we haven't heard from Mariana, Nancy, or I'm a friend to animals. So if any of you would like to comment after Carol, just want to make sure that everyone has a voice. Constance?
I was just going to say that most of the charter schools do not have lunchrooms. They start out with no lunchroom. So they can't offer free lunches or free breakfasts. Another thing is they don't have busing. It's kind of interesting. My brother-in-law was commissioner of education for the state of Rhode Island, and they bused all the religious kids, all the Catholic school kids all got complimentary busing from the state. Here they don't get busing. You don't have before and after school care sometimes at these places. They don't have room. They start out with a few trailers. They start out with a storefront or something. So there's a lot of things working against a poor parent who's trying to, cannot afford to buy a lunch or provide a lunch every day. So that's another thing. Another thing about people who didn't get money from some of these government programs like Social Security. I was talking to some ladies at Lake Care food pantry, and they said a lot of people that get food assistance are older women who worked for these people. They were laundresses or maids or people who do alterations and stuff like that. They were paid under the table, so there were never, and most of the time it's women, so they never were eligible for Social Security. So it's kind of a gender thing too. And she was saying how many older women of color get food. It's a lot from these food banks. But anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, I just heard recently in a conversation also that farm workers at times were paid cash also, and so ended up without any kind of benefits at retirement time and things. So, Carol?
Yeah, just two notes. The Peekskill, New York schools, I'm friends with someone who was teaching music, and one of the things that happened with the big movement to charter schools was that it stripped enough funding out of the public schools that they had to cut back on many of their programs, music being one of them, art, even social studies, even some of the quote hard science subjects. So it really does, the charter schools really do pull money and resources from the public schools. The one thing that appears to be working, and I don't have numbers, is New York City and a number of other cities have specific schools for art or engineering or math or languages, and they seem to pull students multiracially, at least in New York City. And it's generally academic competition to get in, but it is colorblind for the most part. That kind of a magnet school system seems to help with the brighter kids.
Mm-hmm.
There again, you are pulling a brighter segment out of the community. So I don't know.
So we're just about, our time is just about up here. I don't know if everyone sees this little sign that I see, but we've got a minute to go here. Wanted to say thank you to Nancy for being our note taker. I don't know if you have any questions you want to ask, or if there's any final comments, just a few seconds here. I know that this, when the time is up, we go off to the big group again, and we'll have time to talk further there as well. So
I have a quick question, if I may.
Sure.
What are some of the thought leaders who I should follow in this field?
Who are some of the
thought leaders? Yes,
How
like
leaders?
Stacey Abrams in Georgia, similar to them.
Well, you could try Mae and Cassandra and David and all of our facilitators today.
More seconds to join the group. We're not muted now. Okay, so do we have a volunteer for our group? Someone that will take notes and who is willing to share the highlights from our group once we're back in the bigger group? I can't see everyone. You can unmute yourself and speak up if you would like to volunteer. I don't want to voluntold anybody, but I will. So, you don't have anyone?
I nominate Diana Reed.
Great. She was going to be my person. Diana, are you okay with that?
She's not.
You're muted.
I'll try.
Thank you. Great.
I'll get you back, Ruth King.
Okay. So now that we are in the smaller groups, I guess we can start. Does anybody have anything they would like to say, or should I just kind of jump into the discussions? Was there anything new that you didn't know before? Maybe you learned something new?
Well, may I say something first, Cassandra?
Absolutely.
In my calculations, we had 14 for the blacks, actually 14 lost cards, no money cards, and 1 land card.
Oh, so maybe are there any other participants that were black? So my calculations were off.
Yeah, I had those I found that discrepancy also.
And
And I agree also with her new count. Yes.
Okay, so there were 13 lost opportunities.
No, 14.
14.
14 lost, 1 land, and no money.
Oh boy, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just worse than we thought.
Exactly. Oh, wow. Okay. So the goal here for the simulation was to gain a better understanding of the racial wealth gap, income, and hunger gap, so that we can understand why racial equity is important to address structural inequality, discuss racial equity within our organizations, congregations, and/or communities. It was also a goal that we would incorporate a racial equity lens into our personal daily work, life, worship, policies, practices, and advocacy. We also hope that after this simulation, you will feel more comfortable explaining the importance of applying a racial equity lens when working to end hunger, poverty, or achieving other goals and issues within our communities. And thank you so much, Ms. Deborah, for pointing that out for me. I have to say something about it when I get back. Okay, so can anyone tell the group about your experience, how it felt being a white participant or a black participant?
I do have one comment. It wasn't mentioned that the issues that Black people face in the medical, in the medical field, that when they between doctors and that there is often discrimination among doctors with Black patients. I have a personal experience, and it's a very long time ago because it was when I was in college, but my roommate was Black. She was from Chicago, and she related that when she went to a gynecologist for a checkup, he refused to believe that she was still a virgin at 16 because as a Black girl, he did not believe that was possible.
Wow.
So, yes. And that was my first introduction to where, yes, racial discrimination starts early and it's unkind at best.
Absolutely, I agree. And actually, that is my field. I have a master's in public health, and so a lot of that is what I've dealt with. And not only that, also with childbearing. A lot of times the moms die or the babies die because we just don't get the care that our white counterparts get. And also, doctors have always had this thing that we can tolerate more pain than
Yes.
white women. They have this preconceived notion. I have no idea where it comes from, but they believe that we can tolerate more pain. So where they'll give us an aspirin and send us home, they'll give a white woman a prescription for something, to deal with the pain and things like that. So you're absolutely right. And I didn't make the simulation. So of course, if I had done it, that would probably be in there.
Yes.
And actually on our church service this morning, they talked about Henrietta Lacks, the one that they harvested her cells, and so many people have benefited from that. And they did so many experiments on her, without medication, and it was just horrible. So you are absolutely right. Does anyone else have anything to share?
Cassandra, I'd just like to say I hope that we can all get copies of these policies because they so succinctly sum up the plight of the African Americans. When we're trying to explain it to other white people, sometimes it's hard. And this is a very good guide because it's brief, it's succinct, and it shows the impact that it has. So I was hoping that the policies that you showed could be shared with all of us at the end.
So absolutely. The last slide of the event has the information for you to be able to go and pull up the whole simulation and everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So was there anything that you learned or found most interesting? Did anybody find anything really interesting in there?
What I wanted to share, this is Jill, was that about 2 months ago, I participated in a webinar on racism in the villages. And much of the same data was presented, but it was presented without the background information. And so it came out as being anti-racism, but it was more racist because it would say 5 times as many people in jail, single parent families, and went through all the data, which was blaming the victim. And really the presentation reinforced racial stereotypes rather than explain any of what this simulation did, where it helped show the reasons why that skewed data exists and those lack of opportunities. And I just was so disturbed by that webinar that I went to, and I'm hoping maybe to share this content with the club and the person who did that presentation, because this is so much better and so important.
Yeah. Awesome, awesome. I am so happy to hear that because there was a few things I left out, but some I felt that was really important. And I said, no, this, for the sake of time, but I was like, no, we have to keep this part in there so that people understand the background and how we got to where we are today.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's the whole point. Joe,
Yes.
would you mind, if you mind, tell me so, but would you mind sharing the group that did this seminar that was turned out anti-racist that turned out to be racist, or would you rather keep it quiet?
And I don't think the person who presented it had a clue. No, it was the village's humanist club.
Okay.
And generally, I think they try not to, but it all depends so much on the presenter. And I think it was such a great, terrible example, but a good example of how data can be used selectively to reinforce biases rather than tell true stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Ms. Jill. So were there any trends that you saw in the simulation? Did you see any trends like that kind of went through each of the policies?
Denial of land and housing.
Absolutely. And they find so many different ways to accomplish that same goal, right? Between different policies. Absolutely.
And it's reflected still now today.
Yes, that's correct.
And I was astounded at what was the act passed in 1934? I hadn't heard of that. That it actually excluded Blacks?
Yes, let me see which one that was. Oh, hold on, I can pull that one. 1934. So that one.
That was FDR.
Okay. Okay, I don't see that.
Well, just say somebody said that's FDR.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, I see
Implying
it.
that was his policy. You don't know that. He had to bargain a lot with Republicans in the Congress to get things that it may not have been exactly what he wanted. I don't know if it was or not, or but I don't think that we should assume that.
So, was that the one? I think it says the National Housing Act of 1934.
Yes.
Since the legislation prevented Blacks from receiving federally backed home mortgages, whites usually purchased homes.
It was true. It was the trend at that time. That was not anything different. Our military was still segregated. All of that was the case at that time. It just wasn't considered to be part of the. It wasn't considered to be acceptable at that time. They were excluded from a lot. Blacks were excluded.
I have a comment. I'm a homeowner, first-time homeowner from 15 years ago is when I purchased it, and what Kathleen was saying about how things that was just status quo back then. But what about now? What about now? It still is
happening.
It's still happening today, and so I guess I want to bring it into the present. You know, when I bought my house, I looked at it and it looked an awful lot like well, it was made in 1927. I thought I was naive enough to call the Historical Society. They didn't laugh at me, but they did assure me that I'm in the wrong neighborhood for this kind of, well, they didn't say you're in, but that this house was not eligible for historic status. Wow. And well, that was the beginning. I haven't been able to get loans for home repair, etc. And you know, I'm glad, thankfully, I have great income. This past pandemic year, I right before it started, I began to try to refinance my home, and boy, did I think I got the runaround. I'm not pointing fingers, but after today's education,
absolutely,
I think I got the runaround. Thanks.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. And also, I listened to Joe Madison in the morning, a talk show host, and he talked about when he was ready to sell his home, the realtor person told them to take the pictures down from the walls because that makes it really hard to sell the homes.
Yes.
And also
Yes.
they'll come in and try to lowball you, as far as how much they'll pay because, you're a Black person. So it happens. It happens even now today.
Yes.
They
Yes.
get lower assessment
it looks
in Black-owned homes.
And
even
I was
if they're
not
in a white neighborhood. Yeah.
And I was not able to refinance. No, and I went through 2 appraisals. Thanks.
I lived in a house in down in Lake County. I live in Jacksonville Beach right now, by the way. And somehow I got this from Lake County Democrats told me about this webinar, which I appreciate being able to get in on it. But I lived in a neighborhood that wasn't segregated, and but my next door neighbor, who had been a realtor, when we got ready to sell our house, they said we had some pictures of black friends. And I had an artwork of a little black girl that I had gotten down in the Caribbean. And they said, hey, you better take those pictures down because somebody's going to think you're a Black person.
Oh, my goodness.
I was kind of shocked with that.
Oh, wow.
I didn't do that. I didn't take them down.
Good for you, Bill.
Good for you.
Good for you, Bill.
But what shocked me was they said that the GI Bill kept black veterans from doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea.
Absolutely.
Because it was administered by the states, not by the federal government. So all the southern states could do all this discriminatory action.
Right.
Mm.
Okay, so we're
One of the slides, it seems like some of the things still need to be updated to today because we're giving current examples. And the part with voter suppression and lack of being able to vote, and when we're looking at all of those bills that are being introduced, including in our state, but in about 40 states right now, to prevent Black people from voting, it's really horrifying, and we're living in it right now. I guess one of the things is to look at how we might work together to help counter those because it is so huge at this moment.
Absolutely. I know Jane Hepting asked that LCBR, which is Lake County Voices of Reason, we were integral in keeping the Confederate statue out of Lake County. But she asked that we kind of help advertise and push out. They're having a rally against the 2 recent bills, like the one against peaceful protest that DeSantis brought up, and also the one where they want people to have to register every year for mail-in ballots. And it's because mail-in ballots were so successful this time, and so now they want to counter that and prevent people from doing it. And so most of the supervisor of elections are saying we don't even have the money to try to, have people to do this every single year versus every 2 election cycles. So you're absolutely right. We have upfront today examples that we can use because these things are definitely happening.
And,
I think that
the worst thing here is Dennis Baxley, who is my state senator, who has also proposed that nobody except immediate family can have a ballot.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're absolutely right.
Give me a break. I don't have any family. Many people don't have family here. So that means you either mail it in, if you can't get to the polls, you have to mail it in really early.
Right.
Because nobody can take it there for you. Unless you have the money to get a cab if you don't drive. Give me a break.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Funny thing about vote by mail is in Lake County, there used to be a big contest to see who could get the most vote by mails, the Democrats and the Republicans.
Right.
Everybody knew that if you got people to sign up by mail, they were more likely to vote.
Yeah.
Because, but remember that? Remember that down there?
Absolutely.
And see, the thing is, in the Black communities, we were afraid to vote by mail because we didn't know what would happen. And so this time they changed that and they got us all to do the vote by mail. And Now, all of a sudden, it's a problem for vote by mail. Oh no, we can't do vote by mail because all of these, other people are taking advantage of that. So, absolutely. So we had a few more questions, but it looks like it's going to close us out in of just a few seconds. Here. Yeah.
Am I on the phone line?
May I
can hear you. Let me see.
Talk fast.
Before we get kicked out. Edward? Okay.
Thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you so much for participating.
There he is.
Thank you. Good to see you, Bill.
I got inspired. I got inspired today that they called from the Democratic Party for volunteers. I'm calling them back.
Women and men were unable to vote without a birth certificate, which is one of the things that led to the Voting Rights Act.
Yes.
I have a question about that. Were those births not recorded like in church records?
I'm not really sure. I just know that there was a discussion with some African Americans who went through Rosewood. Are you familiar with the Rosewood issue when they burned down that town? And several of them, because there was no Black hospital nearby, had no birth certificate and for years could not vote, which of course we know today that's not necessarily so, although they're trying to, I won't go there, but this definitely affects who has gotten into office over the years.
Yes. May I say this? This is Clarissa Davis. In the event of both of my parents was born in Goldsboro, North Carolina. And his parents, which was my grandparents, they recorded each child's birth date in the Bible.
Right.
So they did that at home? They had like a family Bible?
Yes, they had a family Bible. Yes. And they recorded it in the Bible.
Now, let me ask you this. Were they able to get a birth certificate as a result of that? No.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I have a correction to that. My grandmother was able to get her birth certificate from that Bible.
Really?
It depends on the state. I used to work for the Social Security Administration, which did help people establish their birth dates for Social Security purposes, but it was up to the state whether or not that would be recognized. So you could get federal recognition, but the state didn't necessarily accept that. And so that it became quite difficult, especially in the Southeast where a lot of people had midwives and so the births just being recorded in the Bible, it was up to the local government to, whether or not that would be accepted.
Yes. And that's true because with my father was born in 1906 and he was born in Johnston County, North Carolina. And when he turned 65 to apply for his Social Security, they found out that he was actually older than what he was because of the fact that he was not able to get the birth certificate, but they was just able to, and from the Bible, but because the state would not issue a birth certificate.
Did he receive Social Security benefits?
He did. He received it. He received it.
He was accepted for federal purposes and Social Security, even though the state may not have given him a birth certificate.
Yeah. Yes. He was able to get it.
It's very important because Social Security will tend to accept things like that, regardless of what the state does, and that's the most important.
Yes. And seeing what happened when my father moved from North Carolina, he moved to Philadelphia, and that's where with Social Security he applied for it in Philadelphia, and he found out when he applied for it, he said he found out he was older than what he was. Yes.
That's kind of cute.
Yes.
So, how many people who was white and who was Black? How many people were white? Okay, and how many people were Black? And so, do you want to share how it felt to be either? Was there any emotion attached to it at all, or did you learn anything different?
Personally, to me, this is Clarissa Davis again. It's always emotional. It's something that will always stay there. No matter how old you get, you you know that you have to press on, but those memories are there, and it stays there. And it does make you emotional.
I agree. This is Barbara Hill, and when I was reading The Warmth of Other Suns about the people who were trying to leave the South, I was getting so upset, you know, reading about what they had to go through just to get out of the South in one piece. You know, it just really, it's very emotional for me.
Anybody else?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
One of the other things is going through all of these different programs in history. I don't think it's clear to everybody how consistently discriminatory they were. If you asked people on the street, white people on the street, about the GI Bill, they would not know that it left people out. I'll bet they wouldn't. And it's just awful. The people, we really haven't learned about what's underneath the names of these bills and policies.
I do have some good news about that. As a teacher in Lake County, they have started this equity initiative. And that is to bring equity into the schools, because we still have the issue where African-American students are, excuse me. I am so sorry. I should have crated them up, but I didn't. So anyway, they perform lower than white students. And so we are trying to get some equity with that. And part of that is teacher training. I mean, I'm a big Black history buff, and I didn't know half of this stuff. So, you know, we need to include it in our history books. We need to talk about it in our classrooms. I'm an English teacher, so when we read Langston Hughes or any of those great Black writers, that's what we talk about. There's also another book that was just out recently, The Nickel Boys, about issues that went on in Florida. And I think it's really important that students understand that a lot of this went on in Florida.
Yes.
Because we think of it as a sunshine, well, white people think of it as a sunshine state where the beach is, where Disney is, you know. Nobody came much further inland to see what was really going on except for the farmers.
But it's a lot of history in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Especially here in Lake County, we really have quite a sordid history. I live in Umatilla, which is the home of
Willis McCall.
Willis V. McCall.
Oh, yes.
And the road, which has now been renamed to CR 450, running through the heart of the Black community in Umatilla, was named Willis V. McCall Road. So just a direct slap in the face to our African-American citizens here in this town. So it's deep, it's pervasive. I grew up in Orlando from 1953 on, and just really never came to grips with how deeply racist my environment and my thought processes were. I mean, even in casual words that we use, like you have a black mark against you, or the word blackmail, all the dark things, you know, referring to something bad, and all of the white things referring to purity and goodness, and you know, So it's so deeply, deeply entrenched in our culture that we have a lot of work to do.
I hope that in terms of a lot of work to do, I hope that you guys will join me over the summer. I'm going to attend a commission meeting and I'll put the date out. I'd like to get part of the museum. Our museum in Tavares is a Black history floor. So just, I have other questions I'm supposed to ask.
Okay.
So I got to do my, uh-oh, what happened? Here we go. What trends did you see in this simulation?
I was struck by just how many laws just created the structure for racist policies. A lot of times people think, oh, well, that's just individuals or that's just certain regions. But to, you know, look at the federal structure that created the condition and then supported the conditions so that it could be acted out.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, Beverly. Mm-hmm. And still, I don't know if anybody has seen the documentary. I think it's called The 13th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got to fix that. I also noticed Desmond Meade. I think Barbara Hill shared this with me. Even though he is in the top 100 most inspirational people on Time magazine, they will not give him they will not let him take the bar exam, even after he got his degree. And he's done so much for so many people and has proved himself sevenfold. And they're still, you know, I believe that was a racist move for sure. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those things we need to get rid of.
Well, that's DeSantis. He will not pardon Desmond Meade,
right,
because he was dishonorably discharged from the service because he was hooked on drugs and he stole money to buy drugs, which drug addicts do. And then he came out to turn his life around and to be of service to so many other people. And for DeSantis to do this is really ridiculous because there's nothing he can do about the dishonorable discharge. There's no way to go back and ask them to readdress his court-martial. Mm-hmm. And he knows that.
DeSantis is being DeSantis.
Right. There's no rhyme nor reason other than the fact that he is a racist. Absolutely a racist.
We kind of touched on this before with the Voting Rights Act and how that affected generations. But can you think of any other generational impacts this might have had? These policies might have had? How about
you? Just shut it out.
How about you, Cheryl?
Well, I can already tell you that for those who were in the, let's say, age group of 60s, what I would say called the 60s babies and the 70s babies, you'll see that there's a lot of residual that comes down from generations. And I think that's the one thing a lot of people don't get, because even though there are other policies that come in that's supposed to correct that, you've had so many more years that it didn't. So you could put a lot of money somewhere, but it still will never get you on the same level field because it's been so generational, if that makes sense.
If I can,
Yeah, for a lot of, just that we had no money. What did we have? One money card or no money cards at the end?
Mm-hmm.
That meant that there was no money. There was hardly any land to bequeath to the next generation. There's not money to pay for children's college education. All of those deficiencies, they go on and on and on.
Mm-hmm. Also, if I could just add to that, the lack of access, like to goods and services. If you can't afford a car to get to a job, so you're taking public transportation. So that limits the type of jobs that you can get. So then you don't save up money, and you don't have this. You can't purchase a house, and you can't help your kids. And so it all like feeds each other. If you get a piece of money here, then it's taken away over there by another policy.
Just to piggyback on that, one of the things, I don't know if it wasn't really explicitly said, but in one of the housing policies, because African Americans were redlined and couldn't get loans, they had these things called contract loans, where you could get a loan, but it wasn't considered yours until it was completely paid off. So you didn't get any of the equity. And God forbid something happened and you can't make your mortgage payment for a month or two, you could then be evicted and they would move another family in. Pat, would you like to add anything?
I was familiar with redlining, having read about it. And I know that families build their wealth on property and home ownership because those things go up in value, where you might be able to save something if you were, we've seen market crashes and people lose their retirement, et cetera. But if you were able to purchase a home, if that home increased in value, if you were able to sell that home, move to a home that was more valuable, et cetera, you increased wealth in your family. And it disturbed me when I learned about redlining because I realized how deliberate it was and how no matter how hard you tried, you're forced to not be able to improve your financial situation in life. What I didn't realize, and I forget where along the policies it was, that people lost their 40 acres and a mule land, and I don't quite understand how that happened. The Villages is near Royal here, and there are a number of families who managed to hold on to their land from that time. So that's something I'd like to understand a little better, what happened to those folks that they lost their land, because if you could keep your land, you had something valuable.
I interrupt for a second. We have about 15 seconds left according to my clock here before the room will close.
You guys want to go an extra 5 minutes? They said I can request an extra 5 minutes.
Yes,
Yes,
that's fine. Can you?
So we need 5 minutes. We need 5 minutes. I don't know if that's going to go to who it needs to go to.
Val will,
it looks like I can.
Val will see it, yeah.
Val will see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that, in talking about that, honestly, I'm really not sure. But what I do know is that only 30,000 people got it. And there were like 4 million slaves
who did it.
So, and I know, when I was a kid, we did a lot of, growing up in New Jersey, my father was part of the union, so he had some black friends. And then, my mother is Barbara Hill. So, she's like so left, she's going to fall off the spectrum. So we learned about 40 acres and a mule, but I was always under the impression.
That was the quickest 20 minutes.
Yeah, we tried to get 5 more minutes, but I guess it didn't work.
I know, I was in the middle of saying something and then watching the countdown.
Right, I warned you. You only have a few seconds.
I put it in the chat, but it didn't. I guess she didn't get it.
Okay,
was like
so
each group needed
all
more
of the
time.
rules were the same. You needed, I mean,
More time,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, we could, I don't know about the rest of my participants, but I felt like with all of us, we could have talked for an hour.
Exactly.
Longer. I want to ask John, I have a question for John that I wanted to ask. Can I ask you, John, do you mind talking about it in front of everybody?
Oh,
He'd love it.
That's fine.
Okay, so I want to know, what was the turning, because I know you grew up in Umatilla, what was the turning point for you?
Well, I grew up in South Orlando, Holden Heights,
I know
which
where that
was
is.
when I moved to Orlando in 1953, that was out of town. Now it's considered almost downtown Orlando. But what was the turning point for me in being aware?
Yes.
Of it's really strange. I was this little Yankee boy that moved to Orlando from New York. So I was always the one being made fun of and chased with sand spurs for a while. And then my dad had an upholstery business on Church Street, near the very heart of the African American business community in downtown Orlando. And so we knew a lot of African American folks. Did we, mingle with any of these folks socially? No, it just was not, that was not done, and you couldn't do that. So I've always been kind of aware, but there's nothing like living with an African American person to sharpen one's focus a little bit on some of the finer points of really how very, very racist our culture is. It's been a blessing, a real eye-opening for me, and I'm thankful every day for my friend Beverly.
Thank you.
Okay, it sounds like everybody had really good discussions in their group, so I'm excited about that. And hopefully we all have somebody that will come back and share. I think we're ready for that part. From my group, we had Diana Reed. I'm sorry, Mae?
I said, yes, we're ready.
We had Diana Reed. Okay, Diana Reed is going to share from my group. Diana?
Okay. Well, first of all, Ruth King nailed me. She nominated me, so I told her I was going to get her back. Maybe after the COVID is over and we can actually see one another. Anyway, the first thing was brought up is that the count that was shown us was wrong. In fact, the blacks had less. They had 14 lost opportunity cards, only 1 land card, and 0 money cards. So it's worse than what was presented. Another item that was brought up that was not covered in our presentation was the discrimination by doctors and those in the medical field against African Americans in terms of giving them care, and particularly the example of pregnant women and women delivering babies, but anything to do with care of Black people, they are, for some reason, there's this old wives' tale out there that blacks can tolerate pain more than whites. If that's true, it's only because they've had to, but they don't get equal care. And then Jill Greenberg shared with us an experience she had in the villages. She attended a webinar that was billed as an anti-racism seminar, and was done by the Villages Humanist Club. And it had similar things to what we showed here, except they did not give any background. They only gave the facts, the net result. Like, yeah, 10 times more blacks are incarcerated, that kind of thing. They didn't tell why. So she said she was appalled. It ended up being more of a racism seminar, promoting racism, than an anti-racist seminar. And she's going to go back to the presenter with what we did tonight. And I had asked if we could all get the information that was presented to us on the screen with all the backgrounds. And Cassandra told me, yes, it will be shown at the end. Because I said, this is a great summary of, cause and effect when you're trying to talk to other white people about what blacks have experienced. Because otherwise, it's like, we just try to say that they're disadvantaged for a reason. They've had prejudice against them. Well, give us some examples, kind of thing. And this is a very good summary. Ruth King brought up that she was not able to get a loan to refinance her house. Although her house was built in 1927, it didn't qualify for historic status. And she definitely felt discriminated against when she was trying to buy and refinance a house. And that's in this era. I mean, it's not this year, but it's recent. And she never did refinance. And the last thing we talked about was real estate values. Well, I said that blacks have systematically been denied land and housing, but Bill Larson shared with us, and I have heard this and read articles about it before, that he had some pictures of black friends or black paintings of black people on his walls when he wanted to sell his house, and the realtor told him to take them down because people would think it belonged to a black family and they wouldn't be offered as much. And the last thing we talked about is the horrendous voter suppression that is resurfaced now and is rampant across the country, including right here in Florida, where we've been, where my illustrious state senator Dennis Baxley has been very active in proposing, for instance, that your ballot cannot be handled by anyone except an immediate family member. And of course, we're also, it's been proposed that we have to register for voting by mail every year. And then there's one other thing that escapes my mind right now. But anyway, there's just all sorts of things going on. I think in like 43 states are trying to enact voter suppression laws. It's terrifying. So that's the summary of what we talked about.
No drop
Thank you,
boxes.
Diana. Oh, no drop boxes. And also was the peaceful protesting.
Right.
Governor DeSantis. Okay, next, someone from Mae's group.
Christy Cleveland is going to share our discussion points.
So all of us, I'm pretty sure, learned something tonight through all that the wonderful resources of the history of all those policies. And we had people in our group who worked for the federal government, who worked for Social Security or the Pentagon, and people who were still learned something, didn't realize that some of these discriminations were going on. And we were also, we talked a lot about the generational impact, how the white privilege, it makes such a difference, all the advantages, and yet it's important that we don't see it as a zero-sum game. And we talked about a little bit about Megan McGee's new book. She's a Black economist, and I happen to be reading it right now, and I can't remember the name, but exactly. I don't know if anybody else.
The Sum of Us.
The Sum of Us, that's it. Yeah, thank you. And how important it is that we get that across, because so many white people feel like they're going to lose if blacks gain. They don't realize that they are already losing things because of these discriminatory practices. And that's something that we really, as a group, need to get that word out there and let people know the facts. So I know my book reading, my anti-racist book reading group, we are going to do that book next. So that's good. So it was just eye-opening. I would say almost everybody was amazed at all these discriminations. So I'm so happy that you have offered this to us. I think we all learned a lot and realized there's a lot more to learn.
Thank you so much, Christy. And I'm in her moving towards anti-racism group, so I look forward to. Yes, there's several of us participating tonight. Pastor Mike. Okay, David or Mary Ellen. David, would you like, who's from your group?
Sure, our group can go. Nancy Hurlbert volunteered to report back for our group, so I'll let Nancy take it from here.
Thank you, David. We had a lot of repetition that we've already heard so far this evening, but one person shared that her husband served 30 years in the service, in the Army, as a matter of fact, and that she was appalled that the government worked systematically to try to work against those that gave so much of their life to the service of this country. We've decided that some people will never recover from these injustices that were performed in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And we heard during the discussion that some of the financial impact was over $600,000 over a lifetime. One person suggested that reparations are due now, and that we should definitely look into supporting reparations, either in housing or Social Security, and those that we could identify definitive numbers on. One person shared that she owns 2 houses in Leesburg today, and those 2 houses turn out to be on one piece of property. So in order to sell one, she'd have to pay money in order to subdivide that particular piece of property. Another thing that she was not aware of when she entered that particular negotiation. One person suggested that not much has changed today. There's still a lot of injustice, and the United States is not alone in injustices, that these situations do occur in other countries as well. Many, I would say all of us, were angry, and we were hoping that perhaps if anything positive came out of COVID, that maybe there was a more equal, a more equal justice, that everybody would be treated with unemployment equally and food services equally. We talked about segregation in our schools today and suggested that perhaps charter schools may be one of the reasons why there is segregation today. Charter schools can take advantage of many programs that are not provided in public schools. Charter schools often do not have lunchrooms, so they cannot provide free lunches. Charter schools often do not provide busing, so that there aren't people outside of the community bussed in. We were given an example in New York City that some magnet schools offer arts or dance or music, and that it's a colorblind selection, so that in these magnet schools, the very best across the board are brought in. We were warned to watch out for truth molders, those people that keep saying the same lies over and over again, and that we need to speak out and call them on those issues. And then lastly, as far as Social Security and food assistance and things of that sort, that not only minorities, but also women are at a disadvantage because they are often paid under the table. And when it comes time then to collect Social Security and that, they have not the record of working for a salary. So many of the things that all of us have discussed, we discussed as well. That's it.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Next, we need someone from Mary Ellen's group, I believe.
Hi, it's Barbara Hill. We started out with talking about birth certificates, how difficult it was years ago for Blacks to get birth certificates because they weren't born in hospitals and there was no one to record the birth. But some people talked about it being in the Bible, in their family Bible, and some states would accept that so they could get a Social Security card and get signed up for benefits, but it depended on the state where you lived. We talked about the fact that the GI Bill was consistently discriminatory, which I can remember a lot of that. That's, you know, remember when the soldiers came home from World War II, they were certainly not treated equitably at all. Mary Ellen brought up that in her school, they're doing a lot of equity initiative training, teacher training, so that the children who are Black will get the same schooling as the white child. You know, I've helped Mary Ellen in school on occasion, and some of those kids are pretty smart, and all they need is a little boost. You know, you're doing a great job. You keep it up. They don't need to be stepped on. They need to be hoisted up a little bit. One young man talked about a road going right through the heart of Umatilla called Willis McCall Road. I can't imagine. And it finally was renamed, I guess, after he was out of office, because he would have been pretty annoyed. Anyway, we talked a lot about what many of the other groups talked about. We talked about, Mary Ellen brought up that she wants to go to the commission this summer when she's off and ask the commission to dedicate a portion of the museum to Black history. Because remember, they wanted to bring in a Confederate statue, and we kind of fought that off for the time being. One conversation looked at the federal structure that's always supported racism. I know they like to think that they're open and loving and caring, but we know that's not true. And they have not treated blacks and whites equitably at all. Oh, let's see. Poverty can be generational, and we see that a lot. I remember listening to NPR, and they had a young man on who was 16, and he was an African American, and he was taking coding in one of the Boys and Girls Clubs. And he said, if it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have known there was anything else to do, because his mother was a drug addict and his grandmother was dealing drugs. I mean, I think we as a nation have dumped all this on them, and we need to find a way to turn it around. And then the lack of access to transportation. A lot of people hold two jobs, and the only way that they can get there is by bus, because they don't have cars. And that makes it twice as difficult if you're going from one job to another job. I can't imagine on a bus. And then the other thing, there was one more thing, now I can't find it. Oh, from personal experience, we moved into our home in 2008. We bought it in 2007. And that was when the Great Recession started. And I have to tell you, we had a lot of Black families that lived here, and they were the first ones to lose their homes, which I thought was really, really sad. And I know what the banks did, because I worked at, I volunteered for a while at Community Legal Services, just to handle the foreclosures. I mean, it was just ludicrous how the banks suckered these people into these loans that they couldn't possibly pay. Anyone in their right mind knew that they couldn't pay it, but the greed was too much. So anyway, it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. It was kind of emotional for me, because I've been involved in a lot of this for a long time. Thank you for Mae and Cassandra. This is great.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barber. We appreciate you. And I thank everyone who participated in the groups. It looks like we're almost out of time, so I'm going to let Mae run over a couple of things really quick, because we definitely want to make sure that you get the final slide that has the information for those that want to go and do more research about this racial wealth gap simulation. So give us just a couple minutes, please. Oh, we still have to do a few other things. Mae?
Sorry, it just took me a minute to get there. So we see that racial wealth inequality is rampant in the U.S. This slide speaks for itself. The blue line represents the median household wealth by white people in America, in our country. The darker red line is the median household wealth for Black in America, in the United States. And then the orange line is for the median household wealth for Latinos in the United States. It is clear from $122,000, the median annual household wealth, to $1,633 and $1,233. Those numbers represent one paycheck away from poverty. That's what those numbers are. And then we look at what that means in the ratio for a white household to a black household. That's 13-to-1 ratio. 140, the median net worth. This is the median net worth, 141,000 to 11,000. The median net worth.
And so on that one, it was for, like she said, the mid-level. So this is more towards the poverty line, those that are, you know, and it's going to compare the two, and you'll see that it's even worse for those lower down on the poverty line. It's 18,000 to 0. Okay, Mae.
And these are some questions, and we're going to leave this slide up for a minute. And just ask yourself this: what did you learn that you didn't know before? How do you see the racial wealth and income divides play out in your own communities? Barbara Hill just spoke of what she saw play out during the housing bubble. She saw it play out. And how does this impact your work, your own personal work, to change the racial wealth gap or engage work in your community? Again, it is not a zero-sum game. Take something from whites and give to blacks. It's not that. We are all need to be equal. What did you learn about the importance of racial equality, and how can you personally incorporate racial equity in that lens into your daily work, life, and your worship policies, your practices, advocacies, etc. Those things that you do personally, because we reach out and we touch people individually. How can you incorporate what you learned tonight and keep it in the forefront of your mind when you engage with your network of friends and people? Just keep these questions in mind. And if you want to access the simulation and see what it looks like in its entirety, there's the link to it is go to bread.org/simulation. And then let's stay in contact with Cassandra and I. Her email address is there, as well as my email address is there. And if you need anything from either of us, please reach out to us, touch us, and we'll get back to you. We need to continue this discussion for sure.
Thank you so much, Mae. And now we will, again, we thank you all for participating. We had some great discussion. Hopefully you learned something from this evening. And now we will turn it back over to UCC. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you again, Cassandra and Mae. And I also want to thank everyone who participated in this discussion tonight. It's been meaningful, and as has already been said, I hope we can continue with this kind of discussion. It's important that we do. I want to extend our congregation's gratitude to Jane Hepting in particular, and to the UU Social Justice Committee, Barbara Hill, and the UU Social Justice and Environment Committee, they have made all of these lecture programs possible. And I also need to thank Val Rosato and the tech team. It's not an easy job to make these Zoom acts happen. They do it. And I want to invite everyone to tune in again next month when we will begin our three-part series on protecting beautiful Lake County's environment. It's called Keeping Lake County Beautiful. April's program begins at 7 o'clock on Sunday, April 11th, and features a panel of Peggy Cox, Marianne Krasovich, and Susan Fetter, who will be talking about protecting our waterways. Until then, I will extinguish our chalice and remind one another to be anti-racist in our activities and to be an advocate for our healthy environment, and to always always, always side with love. Thank you all, and good night.